They had a dirt base, then a brick base, and it had cracked from baking, and coals had fallen down underneath onto some pine wood that we used for lighting fires, and that had flared up into the roof. So by the time I got up, it was way too late. And this flood washed out bridges and dams, and the one in '85 washed out Numrin Lissu village and washed away 10 houses, and 11 people lost their lives in that flood. Doreen says, "John, we've come to arrest you for murder." And I go, "You've got to be joking."
In the far north of Thailand, close to the Burma border, Australian John Spees has been living a life of adventure for over 30 years. His guest house, started from nothing, now has a constant stream of international visitors. He has become something of an expert on the area, its amazing caves, its archaeology, and its exotic hill tribe.
This is Cave Lodge, my home. We live here and we get travellers from all over the world coming to stay with us. They come here for adventure, for meeting other people, having fun, and we're a bit of a base for that. So this is our main common area. We have a fireplace here in the wintertime, kitchen out the back, and we're just stuck here right over the river, just upstream from the cave. These are our wood-fired ovens where we bake all of our bread and muffins and pizzas and chickens and our massive roast dinners at Christmas and New Year. Fantastic things.
When in 1977, a young John Spees left Australia in search of adventure, he could never have imagined where this remarkable journey would lead him. His chance meeting with Ju, a young trekking guide in Chiang Mai, would mean that he never got further than Thailand. He fell in love not just with Ju, but with the remote, beautiful mountain areas of far northern Thailand and the colourful hill tribe people that live there. His gift for photography meant that he was not only able to experience these exotic cultures, but also to record them. His brilliant photographs remain one of the few valuable records of a rapidly disappearing lifestyle. John's constant thirst for adventure also led him into the numerous unexplored caves in the area. He had chanced on some of the finest caves in Thailand. Typically, John soon taught himself to become not just a cave explorer, but a first-class cave photographer. And the discovery of numerous thousand-year-old coffins in the cave led him deep into the field of local archaeology. The caves, in particular Tam Lod, have proved to be a valuable resource and provide the local people with a valuable income. John has even had the privilege of escorting royalty into the cave. John loves the life he has created for himself in this remote area, but over the years it has certainly not been without its problems.
Stu and I were sleeping in a little hut over by the side of the main house, and she was 7 months pregnant with Shane, our second child. About 4 o'clock in the morning we heard this very distinctive sound. It's the sound of bamboo exploding when it burns. It's a very sharp explosion. So I jumped out of bed naked, ran out the house, the whole back of the house is on fire, ran back in, put some pants on, smashed down the door, picked up our big pot of water. We had 3 of our staff sleeping in just near the ovens. above a storeroom, and their roof was on fire. And my daughter Mindy, she was 5 years old, she was running around screaming out to the girls to get up, and then we got them to call out to the village, and we had no village water system then. We had one little tank out the back. We had about 2 taps around there. It was a very slow process getting water. There was a lot of adrenaline pumping that night. I was really, never been so scared. We were running around for hours, and after about a couple of hours, we finally put it all out. It was the ovens I'd built. They had a dirt base, then a brick base, and it had cracked from baking, and coals had fallen down underneath onto some pine wood that we used for lighting fires, and that had flared up into the roof. So by the time I got up, it was way too late to just put it out with a few buckets of water. We've had a few other fires since, but we know the only way to deal with it is large amounts of water, very, very fast. So we've got these big barrels of water around all over the place with buckets lying around. So if there's ever a fire, we can just bucket it onto it. You've got a couple of minutes. When we first set up the Cave Lodge, the locals warned us that the river does every 10 years or so go into flood. So we decided we'd build high up above the river on the side of the mountain. And in 1984 and 1985, there were 2 massive floods that filled up the whole valley. And this flood washed out bridges and dams, and the one in 85 washed out Namrin Lissu village and washed away 10 houses, and 11 people lost their lives in that flood. We fortunately were well above it, so it was rather exciting to watch this massive torrent pouring down through the valley with dead cows and logs, and it was rather frightening, the power of water. Around late 87, moving up into the winter season, which is the high season around there, there was a few incidents that sort of started going from bad to worse.
From the local villages, inevitably relationships have occurred. The result occasionally could be worrying.
She said, "There's no way I can have a baby, my father's going to kill me," or etc., etc. I said, "Well," she says, "I want to go and do an abortion." And I said, "Well, if you're going to do it, go to Chiang Mai, go to a proper hospital, get a doctor to do it." And so she went down to Chiang Mai and comes back a few days later and says, "So what happened?" Says, "I've done it. The doctor says I was 6 months pregnant, and he broke my waters, said I'm going to give birth to a stillborn baby within 10 days. What? Couldn't believe it. And so, that's unbelievable. I mean, that's just so dangerous for the mother, for the abortion at that late stage. I said, "Was a real doctor?" Said, "Yeah, I was in, such and such a hospital." So after 10 days, I said, and nothing's happening, I said, "Let's go." So I chucked her in the Land Rover, which was sort of starting to become a bit of an ambulance by then, on this rutted dirt roads down to Chiang Mai to go and see the abortionist. And we're almost in Chiang Mai, and she's having these labour pains. We're actually way out of Chiang Mai, and I'm going, "Oh no!" So I got my foot flat to the floor. We're racing in there, get down there, and we get hold of the abortionist. She, as a woman, says, "I got nothing to do with it. Just take her to the general hospital in Chiang Mai and tell them she fell downstairs, and whatever you do, don't tell them about me." She gave birth to this poor little baby boy, 6 months, that was still alive. And it was horrible. I'm sitting down there, and they all think I'm the father or whatever, and I'm going, "Look, they're going, what happened? It was an abortion, wasn't it?" And I'm going, "Yep, certainly was. I wasn't going to protect the woman who did it." And so anyway, fortunately for the parents and probably the baby as well, after a few days it died. Bruce, this Australian guest, come running in, and he was just covered in sweat. His hair was covered in mud, and he was pretty frantic. He'd been out with a group of 5 of our guests, all of them Australians, and they'd been exploring deep inside Tum Lot. And he said that Ian had fallen and cracked his skull open inside Tumlot. And I thought, oh my God, and I asked him where. You go in the entrance here, you go up these really steep ladders. It's way inside the very, very end chamber of the cave where there's this 10-metre deep, very slippery, slick, basically pit that goes down. And Ian had fallen at the top of that and bounced down with his head. And at that moment, he was sitting down the bottom of the hole with blood gushing out of a gash in his skull with a couple of Australian nurses down there. We got down to the bottom of the pit, he's leaning up against the wall, his head's cracked open, there's just blood all over the place, all over his shirt, soaked in it. He was still bleeding. We had to get him up the slope. It was this super steep, slippery slope. We had a blanket under his arms and other people holding our ankles as we pulled him up bit by bit, got him to the top of the pit, raced out to the ladders. Big Canadian guy from the lodge draped him over his shoulder, lumbered down the ladder. We put him on a stretcher and ran out to the Land Rover. We had this stretcher with a bamboo and this old grey Chinese blanket, and it was just soaked in blood, so we couldn't do anything with it except chuck it into the bush over there. And then we threw him on the Land Rover and screamed off towards Pi. This guy Paul had turned up, and he was very strange. He didn't have a very good grip on reality. And he comes and tells Bruce that he's just taken all of his pills because he's a registered paranoid schizophrenic. He's tried to kill himself. And we're going to take him to Mae Son Hospital, you know, and after a few hours drive we figured, oh, well, he's not going to die. And Dew and I had decided the Land Rover was getting so bloody dangerous, and after the trip down there with Ian, we needed another car. And we'd had lots of guests. We finally had the money. We could buy a brand new Toyota pickup. So we said to Paul, look, we've got to drive down to Chiang Mai. Come down with us. You need more pills or he's going to totally lose the plot. Just packed it full of supplies. The brakes worked. It almost died a couple of times with the Land Rover with the old brakes. So I was just so happy to be driving a new car.
But as they approached Cave Lodge, even worse news was awaiting them.
We're coming in from Sepong, the 9 kilometres and last little dirt road into our place. And there's these police cars, you know, screaming out in the road, and there's cops with M16s in the back, and there's man sitting in the back, you know, and he flags us down and says, there's this Farang girl been murdered at the cave. I go, no, you know, because we'd been in Chiang Mai for a couple of days. And we go, whoa, so we drive straight down to the cave parking lot there, and there's some, you know, agitated locals there. They're all going this way, and there was cops there, and there was a few other people. So we just started running, left the car, left all the gear, and started running down towards the exit of the cave, and someone else was pointing that way. So it's about a half-hour walk down there, and we got down to this really remote little stream bed. Eva walked out of the cave alone. She was cold and wet. It was a late afternoon. And when you come out of the cave, you get to this point here, and there's a split in the path. Now, we're not really sure which way she went. Did she go the way towards the temple, or did she go the way back to the village? She'd never been here before. It's confusing, and she really shouldn't have been walking out here alone. So over here you can see the path going up through this dry stream bed here. That's the way back to the village, and up here through the forest, just a bit further on, is the forest monastery. Whatever, the people who abducted her, captured her, injected her with heroin, maybe they met her on the way back to the village, back near a little field hut. Maybe she took the wrong path and went this way. We're not even sure if they were waiting for her or if it was just a coincidence. I'm not sure if the whole thing was aimed at us, trying to close us down or scare us off, or it was just targeting one of our guests. It's a very lonely path, not many people use it. Occasionally the monks come down to the exit of the cave or go down to their small meditation caves, but It's the sort of place where late in the afternoon you're unlikely to meet anyone unless they're possibly laying in wait. Dio and I had driven our new car in from Chiang Mai, and the police had told us that one of our guests had been murdered, and we ran down along this path here as fast as we could. People were pointing the way. They said the body was down here somewhere. We got to about this point just up here, and there was a clutch of foreigners there, standing there. One of them was, well, they were all crying, but one of them was obviously the boyfriend, Peter, and there was a nurse, and she said, "Follow me," and she wanted to show me something, so she took me down here, down to the little stream bed down here. Peter, by this time, he didn't know how she died. He hadn't seen the body. She took me down here to this tiny little stream bed. Then it was dry season, there was no water, and we walked down here and walked a little way up in the stream bed, and she was laid out on some sand. There was some footprints in the sand. There was a little vine wrapped around a neck. She said the underwear had been disturbed. And she showed me a needle mark in her arm. So this is the spot down here in the stream bed where the murderers had brought Eva's body, or had forced her to come here. She was possibly raped here, and the nurse who was with Peter and the other group of foreigners had been looking for her for a few days. Very shortly after the nurse showed me the body, Captain Jarin, the police chief from Sepong police station, arrived with a medic, and they did a sort of preliminary investigation of the crime scene, and handed me a camera and said, "Take pictures of the corpse," as the medic was sort of going over the body, and it was pretty horrific. I still have, those images still sort of haunt me a little bit of Eva, this person who I'd never met alive, but I certainly got to know her over the next few weeks and few months. Police Captain Jarin and the commander from Mae Hong Son turn up early one morning in their full uniform, the studs and the stars and the caps and the gleaming pistols in the belts and the polished boots, and looking very spick and span. And Jarin says, "John, we've come to arrest you for murder." And I go, "You've got to be joking." He pulls out this blanket covered in dried old blood. And he's going, "Is this yours?" And I said, "Yeah, that's mine. It's from bungalow number 11. And then he pulls out this bit of green string rope. He says, "Is this yours?" I said, "Yeah, it's used to be the clothesline. And okay, we found this down near the cave." And here I'm thinking, what is this investigation? Here's Eva. She's been strangled, injected with heroin. There's no blood whatsoever. And they come to arrest me for murder with this blood-soaked blanket. That's bizarre. The murder case dragged on for many months after they gave up on me as a suspect. They had a few others, but eventually they went back to the assistant headman. He was fingered by another Shan man who was an ex-army soldier, Shan State Army soldier, a heroin addict with one eye. And he admitted supplying the heroin that possibly killed Eva. The assistant headman, he was a very aggressive guy, and the police chased him into the Shan State in Burma. Some more soldiers sent him over to the Thai side. They arrested him in a Shan village about 15 kilometres from Sepong. He never made it back on the pickup. He ended up getting 3 bullet holes in the back of his head. It was sort of odd because when they found him, the police commander was on our front veranda with his walkie-talkie and said, "We found Tun." He asked you and I, "How do you want him, dead or alive?" We were really surprised by this question. And then he said something into his walkie-talkie, and yeah, he came back dead. We hope he was the murderer.
The discoveries made by John over the years have been a huge benefit to the area, and some have attracted interest internationally. The cave fish discovered in Sosa Cave, for example, seem to demonstrate how fins may have originally evolved into limbs.
In the year 2005, there's some producers from BBC contacted me and said David Attenborough is making a new series that's going to be a blockbuster, and they wanted to film the cave fish in Susa. They arrived a few months later. The cameraman Justin, the producer Catherine, I'd assembled a team of porters. We had to kayak down the Kong River, carry our inflatable kayaks up to the cave entrance. Of course, they had 400 kilograms of gear, batteries that needed recharging. And we spent 6 days in this cave, in this toxic carbon dioxide soup with a 5% CO2, the emergency meters just going beep, beep, beep.
Of oxygen. We're down almost 4%.
4%. So what's the cutout line here before we start carting it?
I don't want it on the wall at all.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to explain with hand language. So let me frame up, then I'll know exactly what the binary adjustments, and I'll probably go around and sort it out. Explain. We're heading in the right direction.
6 12-hour days, shooting hundreds of hours of video. Well, as you can imagine, in the end, they actually featured about 15 seconds on the fish that they called angelfish. But it was quite an extraordinary experience to spend so long with these very unique little fish with good 200 watt lights, just seeing what they did. If they were this big and waddling up waterfalls, they'd be extremely famous. But the poor little things were only this big, and they're pink. But that doesn't make them any less important.
Over more than 30 years in this area, John has seen and recorded rapidly vanishing and colourful lifestyle.
Tay nặng.
진짜 것 같아. 아, tiene. Menos.
Nó tập còn như hơi bị bỏng.
Cả dối này.
Con nào tí phút chay luôn.
In 1979, Dew and I came to live with these black lahu out here next to the Burmese border. You can see the border out here just behind me. But back then there was no road. It was a very, very traditional village. All the houses were just leaf roofs like this, bamboo shacks. There was about 20 houses, and now, more than 30 years later, there's been a lot of changes. The government has put the road in through here. They've brought in electricity. They've sealed the road down through the village here. People have got pickups, there's, you know, TVs, refrigerators. It's like life has just changed completely. In many ways, you know, they're still living many of their traditions. They're still growing their dry rice out on the fields out around here, and you know, they've kept their animism and their beliefs together. And there's been a lot of changes within the society, and a lot of that's to do with having a school in the village so all the children, instead of going out to work in the field since they were very, very young, they're getting an education now. So that's I knew when we were living with the village, it was the beginning of the end, in a way, of their traditional life, a life that hadn't changed for thousands of years. Talk about wild times. When I left Australia when I was 21 on my way to Europe, and I'm still on my way. I've only made it as far as these border mountains up here in Thailand, but what a wild ride I've had. Oh, living with the hill tribes, exploring caves and everything I've done with my life. Wouldn't have missed it for anything.